Okay, let's move on to iPhone 14 because this was a crazy story. And like I mentioned earlier, if the source weren't one that I trusted, I don't think I would even talk about this story because this seems so crazy. But I'll let you take it away there, LK. Let's talk about iPhone 14.
Yeah, so some iPhone 14 models might miss out on the new A16 processor. So the basic iPhone 14 and the iPhone 14 Max will launch this fall with the same A15 processor as the 2021 models, according to Ming-Chi Kuo. And this is what you were saying earlier. Mm-hmm. This is why it's got some credence. So apparently only the pricey iPhone 14 Pro and the Pro Max will support the new A16 chip. So if this is true, this is going to be a move that Apple's never used before. And I actually wonder whether it's a bigger deal as you're making out.
What do you mean, like people's reactions to this?
Well, I think the kind of people who buy, I think Apple's counting on this, the kind of people who buy the regular, phones, and so the Pro phones won't care.
Well, I don't know if that's true or not. I think for me, the idea that they're going to just come out on stage and say, hey, y'all, here's iPhone 14. And it's got a better camera and some other features that are better than iPhone 13, but you're still getting last year's processor. That seems like an extraordinarily tough sell to me. You mean you're going to give me the same processor that you had last year, and you're going to put the newer processor, which is available, or the newer SoC, which is available, into your phone that costs more? That seems incredibly stingy to me. Like, if they came out on stage and did that, I don't know how you're going to justify that move.
Well, Apple's always done it. Like I say, this is unprecedented, but Apple has, for a long, long time, had this reputation of using, older technology, right? Older chips, older RAM specs, older hard drives, older SSDs. Like its machines have always come under this kind of criticism. Like, people are saying, well, it's, I'm trying to think now some examples from recently, but, the RAM specs and stuff like that. I mean, they're never cutting edge. Apple is hardly ever, or not always, using the latest cutting edge text, right? Like, the port you just mentioned on the back, it's like the older HDMI standard. On ports on previous machines, they used older standards, right? And people just, I don't think, I think they don't, no one who buys an iPhone buys it for the chip. Nobody. They buy it for the camera, right? They buy it for the screen. They buy it for the whole overall experience. And I think Apple's always been kind of like shy about sort of, like promoting anyway, like make it front and center, the technology that's inside the devices. It's always sort of what you can do with it. It's always, the chip is, you don't buy it for the chip, you buy it for the experience that the chip affords.
Yeah.
And I think they'd be able to sell this and it wouldn't be a big deal.
I don't know.
It would be to you.
Maybe you're right. Yeah, it would be to me. I mean, again, I'd be like, "Are you kidding me? Like, this is a brand new phone, and you're competing with all of these flagship phones from Samsung and other manufacturers.
Which they still haven't caught up. Like on the specs. They even if it's an older model, it still runs rings around everything that they've got on Android.
Well, that might be true, but just by the fact that they are updating the internal components and saying that they're new, and now Tim Cook TC is going to come on stage and try to sell you a phone that is not new. It has the exact same SoC as last year, except the cameras. But I just think that's a very odd sell to me. Like, you're going to come out and Samsung is going to be. I mean, they would be crazy not to capitalize off that, like, and say our phones don't use recycled components, right? Like, we're going to give you the best components that we have in our flagship phones, and when you buy a new iPhone.
But these aren't the flagships, are they? You see, the Pros are the flagships.
Yeah.
So if you want to get the A16 processor, you've got to get a Pro handset.
Yeah.
And you'll pay like $300-400 extra. So that's a proposition. If you want to get, if you just want to get a phone further down the line, it's got an older chip in it. But so what? It's probably got an older battery technology. It's probably got an older, it's probably got all sorts of older chips in it, right? I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
And to me, I would think about it for sure. But I think a lot of people, like I just had a friend who just bought a new phone. She didn't ask once about the processor. She couldn't give an SHIT about what the processor is. No, and if I told her, she wouldn't care.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any difference to her.
Yeah, I mean, you might be right. I mean, and maybe that's what Apple is capitalizing off of, is like most people just don't know, and the people who do you care? They'll just get a Pro. We got Dipsy Doo in the chat here saying sales of the Pro models will skyrocket. Was that you, Dipsy Doo? And it's like, yeah, you might be right about that, and maybe that's Apple's play. I just think it's it's just a bad look to me. You have these phones that have parity from a performance perspective, and now you're going to leave behind two of the phones that are supposed to be your. I mean, you say they're not flagship models. I think they are. They're your newest phones, and now they're new in name, but they're not new in internal components. And now your iPhone SE is using the same chip as two of your newer, way more expensive phones.
Well,
I
that's a
think
good
the
point.
whole thing is very strange marketing.
The SE just kind of like the new SE. I mean, that kind of like begs my point. It sort of goes against it, right? Because it does use the latest chip, and it's as fast as the latest phones.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, that was just my impression when I saw this story. I think there's I think a large percent of the population that will not care whatsoever.
So maybe what they're doing then is, so you'll have the SE, which is the older Touch ID, older camera technology, and smaller form factor, right? And then you'll have the newer iPhones. It's not as fast as the Pro iPhones, but it has the like the brand new camera technology, all the newest bells and whistles, aside from the internal, the SoC, right? So it's not going to be as fast. And then the Pro has everything, which...
You know what I bet they'll do is, even if they're using the same old chip, I bet they'll give it a new name.
You might be right. You might be right. There you go. It's like when AT&T called their faster 4G network, or their faster 4G speeds, they call it 5GE. And everyone was like, what the heck? All of a sudden my phone said 5GE, and I was like, what is this? And AT&T was like, well, it's almost as fast as 5G. So now they call it 5GE, which is essentially just a faster mode of 4G. And people don't know, right? I mean, there's a lot going on in life. People don't have time to investigate this stuff. So you might be right. It might be a genius move, but it's like calling it like the Bionic chips. And Phil Schiller was like, we just added Bionic because it made it sound cooler. That was the only reason that there's like an A14 Bionic. It's like there's no such thing. Bionic doesn't actually indicate there's no additional functionality or anything.
Right. It's going to be the A15 Bionicle.
Bionicle.
It's going to make it sound really cool and new.
So we'll see if this happens. I just thought this was stunning news to me, because I never would have expected.
Well, you know what
Apple
they're doing it too. It's got to be the supply chain.
Supply
chain shortages.
Too. Yeah, you might.
So
be right.
they're doing it in a pinch, I'll bet, and they can probably get their hands on a whole bunch of older chips because the fabs are churning those out. But maybe they're having trouble setting up, getting the yields on the new chips. So they're going with this.
So we got David Howard in the chat saying he agrees with Leander and Streamlined. Android phones are crappy wannabes. Look, I'm not arguing that. I'm with you all the way on that. I just think from a marketing perspective, it creates this strange disconnection from you having a premium phone, because you say it's your newest phone, but now you're putting old hardware internally. I just think from a marketing perspective, that could be a problem for them. I never buy the regular iPhones anyway, so I'm always... Look, I'm a Pro guy. We're all Pro guys here, Pro people here, right? So we know which ones we're getting. This is going to affect us, but I
just
also
the
wonder,
riffraff, yeah,
just the riffraff and the plebes, right? But I do wonder if that means they're going to raise the price of the Pros, because we're like, well, it's Pro now. It's like you're getting the Pro stuff. All the Pro stuff's in here, so, and it wouldn't surprise me one bit. In fact, I would be surprised if they didn't raise the prices of iPhones and everything else. I mean, the price of everything is skyrocketing, right? So.
Well, talking of chips, actually, we had an interesting story a couple of days ago, which was a company called MediaTek, which I think they make chips for TVs and stuff like that. I mean, they're definitely not one of the big, chip makers. They've come out with a new chip for Android phones, which is almost as good as the latest A15s, and it beats the pads off anything from Qualcomm or Samsung.
Really?
And some people were wondering, like, whether the benchmarks were correct. Because it's so much more powerful than anything else on the Android side, or whether it's been tweaked. Like they said in the past, like benchmarks are sometimes tweaked so that and they don't reflect in once the handset comes out, it doesn't get anywhere near the performance it does in these sort of early tests. But it was interesting. This MediaTek company is like coming out of nowhere. I mean, it wasn't on anyone's radar screens, and now they have what looks like the second most powerful chip in the mobile space.
Huh. Coming out of nowhere, huh? Well, see, I mean, you have specs on paper and in marketing materials, but like, what does it actually do when it's inside of a phone, right? That's a different
Yeah.
story.
Well, these were based on Geekbench stuff that people noticed. Geekbench scores.
Yeah. And what's the wattage on it? Does it take your your battery life down to like 3 minutes?
I haven't got a clue. Yeah,
Your
I
phone's
didn't.
so hot you can't even touch it.